Hello, everybody. Dr. Meri Crouley for Now is the Time. We've got a very important interview today with GoodDog of QBits. He's an investigative journalist that literally has covered, thousands of hours of journalism of what's happening around the world. And we've got some explosive intel today of what's happening around the world. You're not going to see GoodDog on the screen because he doesn't show his face, but you're going to hear him in the background. And this is going to be really exciting because we're going to go into a number of deep dives onto things that are happening right now. So, anyway, welcome, GoodDog. How are you today? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
We're doing good. I'm working on a piece called The Devil's Advocate, and it's a very interesting deep dive.
Well, the devil's advocate being in Hollywood, there was a movie that had Robert De Niro and Keanu Reeves in it, and it had to do with the devil's advocate. And literally, Robert De Niro was Satan. So it's like, so the devil's advocate, tell us a little bit more about this.
Sure. So what's going on is that there is a coordinated campaign to destroy the United States from within, and that's nothing new. We've been reporting on this for years now. The question is, what are the characteristics of those that seek to destroy the United States? And what is their agenda? And why is it that they're not so interested in finding out what happened to those 350,000 missing kids? And are they behind it? And that
Well, there's
tonight's
probably there's probably a lot more than that, but that's
oh,
what they're talking.
this is just a primer, and I'll come back and remind your audience. They probably already know, but the 350,000 figure are the number of missing children that were used as props by the radical left to import this mass invasion of 20 million people into the country. And these props were used sometimes multiple times coming over the border in the arms of military-aged men. And the question was, why did they do that? What happened to those kids? And the 350,000 figure is just for the first 3 months of this invasion army. But the invasion continued for 4 solid years, all the way up until the last minute of Joe Biden's his presidency, I'd say residency. And the question is, what happened to the kids, and how many is it really? And are there other missing children, and how big is this problem? And so the investigative angle on this it's coinciding with the release of information by James O'Keefe at O'Keefe Media Group. And I did a Substack on this recently, and that Substack is called Royal Wreckage, which we did a show some years ago, back in 2019, called Royal Wreckage. And let me show you what that looks like. Our shows are multi-layered, multifaceted. You should be seeing a number of different shows, right? This is 9 shows out of 100 shows subseries. Okay, so in this subseries, our shows are really to get to the bottom of what is the globalist network? What does it mean by globalism? And what is their primary objective? And when you ask who, what, where, when, why, and how, that means 5W1H. This is how we organized it and how we've reported on it. And so there's a number of different episodes, each one of them about 3 hours long, where we go through and investigate, okay, when did it first start occurring and how did it occur? And that points to the British royal family. Who is specifically involved and when were they involved? That is Spectre. That is to say, the globalist cabal is run by an intelligence network which practices extortion and racketeering and terrorism on a global basis. That's what Spectre means. What are they trafficking in? Again, we're just in the what or in the when characteristic. Since World War II, they've been trafficking in weapons and refugees. It's the most profitable business on earth. It dwarfs the size of all military spending worldwide by a factor of 10. So if you took all the military budgets around the world and you added them all up into a pile and you multiplied it by 10, it still wouldn't reach the size of the global human trafficking network. This is for prostitution, but it's for many other things. It's human slave labor. It's also for some very nefarious things, which we're going to get into. Anyway, filling out the rest of this 5W1H, which are just, these are the first 9 episodes that really deal with the characteristics of this. In the middle of it all is Saudi Arabia. And where did President Trump just go? Saudi Arabia. And why is that? Well, because that's the center of this problem. And it's not the house of Mohammed bin Salman. Rather, it is the competitive house that seeks the crown of Saudi Arabia. This was headed up by somebody President Trump calls dopey, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. And he is the one who is behind the palace coup, which was stopped back in October of 2017 at Las Vegas, the Mandalay Bay shooting. So that's the center of this whole problem. What does this involve? Well, it involves human trafficking, specifically children trafficking and pedophilia, which is what Lolita Express is, and that has to do with Jeffrey Epstein and the Israeli intelligence network that runs it. Now, why is this interesting and how does this come up? You know, we talk also about the globalist advertising campaign called Advertising Globalist Bondage, which is under Why and How, and under Royal Welcome, it's Why and Who. That's who's going to be at when this thing all comes tumbling down, it's going to be the royal family that ends up being disassembled publicly. That's where it's going to end up going. And the royal wreckage is the 4D chess that President Trump is exerting using Elon Musk's Starship. That's how it all works out. Now, we covered this back in 2019, giving an overview of where this is going and where it goes, right now, and why this is so relevant to what's going on right now and our investigation called the Devil's Advocate is that President Trump is in the process of exposing the different elements of that network I just showed you. The specifics of that exposure involve Israel. And so what happened with President Trump? He goes to a U.S. ally, the basis of the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia, and he inks a deal. Starts out at $600 billion. It goes up to $700 billion before he leaves. And on the way out the door, Mohammed bin Salman rides with President Trump in the Beast, that is the car, and on the way there adds another $300 billion deal to the deal. Now, what is the
well, that just happened the last couple of days, you're saying?
Happened yesterday. So here's where it gets really interesting. After that, President Trump then goes to Israel's number one enemy, Qatar. Who's Qatar? Well, they're the guys who are funding Hamas, which did a bad deal a few years ago when they killed so many thousands of people, and they raped and pillaged their way through it. It looked like something out of the 15th century or 13th century. It was absolutely horrendous. In fact, the very last hostage was finally released on Monday as President Trump got on his plane. Are those things related? Turns out they are. What are they related to, and how does this work? Well, there's something else that happened on Monday earlier this week. It sounds like a year ago, but it was just a couple of days ago. President Trump received notice that the government of Qatar was gifting to the United States a brand new 747 fit for a king. Now, what's interesting about that, it's not like the U.S. Air Force One, which was a 747-200 model. That's the older model from the 1980s. It's nice back in the 1980s, but you know what? Technology's moved along and things are a lot nicer. And wouldn't it be nice to have a plane where you can actually talk to somebody and hear what they're saying? Like if you ever noticed in President Trump's investigations or conversations that happen on Air Force One, it's difficult to even hear them. And that's because the soundproofing isn't there. Well, the new plane.
So the Air Force One that he's been riding around in is back in the 1980s. That's when it was built.
Yeah, it's been updated since then, but frankly, it's an old plane. It's old, and there's a million things it doesn't have. And the newer planes, technology's moved a little bit from the 80s, right? I mean, it's a little better. And so that's what Qatar offered. Now, this, in my view, was a foil. Who offered the plane? Well, who's been complaining about the plane? President Trump. Why? Because in the beginning of President Trump's first term, he went to Boeing and said, hey, look, we need a new Air Force One that is commensurate with the office and running the world. So we need a better plane. And Boeing inked a deal. They were supposed to deliver that plane 2 years ago. Did they deliver it? No, they didn't. Why? They're dragging their feet, and they're continuing to drag their feet, and it's really upsetting President Trump. So what does he do? He's talking about this publicly. What happens with Qatar? Qatar has been on the outs because, they've been supporting spies in U.S. Congress like the squad. They caught bribing Bob Menendez back in 2019. If you remember, they were paying him in gold bars, and he hid those gold bars in his freezer. Now, the reason he got outed is he didn't vote the way the Democrats wanted him to. So they executed on their blackmail scheme, which is to hold other Democrats in line. So they tossed him out. They found the gold. The gold came from Qatar. So Qatar. And it's dealing with terrorists, Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, MS-13, and the invasion of the United States. That's who they are. So what's interesting is you stop and you think about it, pull back, take a breath and think. Why would Qatar give a plane like this to the United States?
Well, and just to interject, I mean, I would be suspicious. I mean, you've got this plane. What happens, if they didn't build it correctly? I'm sure that, you know,
Well, that's a good point, but Qatar didn't build the plane. Boeing built the plane. And number one, if it was given to the United States and if the United States received it, which both those things haven't happened yet, if those things happened, it would be taken down to the nuts and screws, and there would be nothing on that plane we didn't know about that wasn't perfect. So
sure.
I'm not concerned with that at all. That's not the issue. The issue is, what was the result? Now, again, remember, this is public. This is not, a secret deal with President Trump and here's a private plane for your stash. No. This was out in public and they did a press release. So this was meant for public consumption. What happened after that? This is where I'm getting, and this is amazing. Remember the image I showed you? Who is implied in that image? Who is behind the Lolita Express? It wasn't the British Crown. It was Israeli intelligence. It was Mossad. So who was the first to complain about President Trump skipping going to Israel and going instead to Qatar? Chuck Schumer, who's also part of the Israeli lobby. I mean, it's mind-blowing. And what does he say? And what exactly did he say? He said, you know what? We need to investigate this. We need to investigate foreign corruption in our government.
Madam President, news of the Qatari government gifting Donald Trump a $400 million private jet to use as Air Force One is so corrupt that even Putin would give a double take. This is not just naked corruption, it is also a grave national security threat. So in light of the deeply troubling news of a possible Qatari-funded Air Force One and the reports that the Attorney General personally signed off on this clearly unethical deal, I am announcing a hold on all DOJ political nominees until we get more answers.
Well, that's an interesting statement, Mr. Schumer. It sure would be a bummer if the FBI was directed by the Department of Justice that is now being run by patriots to investigate all elected members of U.S. government for their corruption. Thanks for the idea. Now, here's where this is really interesting, and this is powerful. Let me show you some. This is, this whole Q movement. This is where we got our start. And I was not aware when I got started about this Q thing at all. I was working in tech. I was building factories, specifically process automation and lights out facilities. That's my background. And I was doing this for the industrial side of the largest manufacturer on earth. And the reason I was doing that is I was good at it. I could see about 1,000 different things at once and figure out what the problems were. And this is kind of an unusual skill. And so that's kind of how I rose to the top of that. But in the process of that, I found out that the U.S. government was involved in the IP, or intellectual property tech transfer, to communist China of U.S. military secrets. And this is what I came out and started reporting on to begin with. And this is where I ran into the Q. Now, since then, the Q has become sort of this verboten thing you don't talk about. I mean, if you do, it's like kissing the third rail in a subway. It's going to be a bad experience. And so we are QBits, and so you might imagine we've had some problem with censorship and completely disappearing off the web. That said, what the radical left say through their mouthpieces and in Congress, is that those that are following the QAnon movement, they say QAnon as if that's a thing. It's not. It is a slur. Like if you called somebody the N-word, this is what QAnon is. It's an N-word. It's a bigoted term meant to be hung around their political enemy's neck. And it's had the same effect as shouting the N-word down south when there were different drinking fountains. It's the same thing by the same people with the same agenda. That is to diminish and demoralize and dispute and destroy their political enemies. Now, have they always thought this? And this is such an interesting dive. When you get into this, you realize just how corrupt this is. They knew, that is, those in the press knew what Q was from the very beginning. They have despoiled people. They've destroyed lives, including Buttercup's and mine, by the way. And they did this knowing that what they were doing was evil. Let me show you. This is from May 25th of 2013. You might remember that on the 20th of May 2013, Edward Snowden had basically escaped from the United States and set up meetings in Hong Kong to release a whole treasure trove of data. Turns out he was a contractor for the CIA. Turns out the information that he gave away was from a competitive agency to the CIA. In other words, he gave away all the secret sauce of the NSA, not the CIA. He didn't give away any CIA data, just the NSA. So why did this spy versus spy go to Hong Kong? Well, that's because that's where the Chinese intelligence headquarters is. That's why he was giving it over to them. And here's the evidence of that. And by the way, note who is actually speaking in this piece from CNN from May of 2013.
Where is Ed Snowden? An international manhunt is underway to find the man who leaked some of the U.S. government's biggest secrets.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old.
Weeks ago, Snowden started final preparations for his leak and the great escape that followed it. He moved out of his house in Hawaii on May 6th and left the country on May 20th, telling his girlfriend he was leaving town, but not why.
Over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it.
But it turns out the government was looking for Snowden even before he revealed himself as the source of the intelligence leaks. The NSA's Security and Counterintelligence Directorate, also known as the Q Group, is the agency's internal police force.
They're basically the cops or the police of the NSA. Their main job is to make sure that there are many analysts and officers and program managers are not targeted by foreign intelligence services.
Eli Lake of the Daily Beast broke the news that the Q Group has been hunting Snowden for weeks.
The NSA Q Group is trying to find out everything they can about Mr. Snowden, about his online habits, his travel habits, the people he knows.
And the Q Group is trying to suss out any connections Snowden may have to foreign governments.
We know from some of the stories in the Washington Post and the Guardian that Mr. Snowden was well aware of encryption keys and technology that he can use to try to cloak his movements in cyberspace. So right now it is, I would imagine, a bit of a cat and mouse game in terms of the people who are hunting him and the hunted whistleblower.
For now, Snowden's whereabouts are unknown, at least to those of us outside the Q Group. Snowden has checked out of the luxury hotel in Hong Kong where he had been holed up after racking up an $8,000 bill for his 3-week stay.
What would it take to make you leave everything behind?
Going into hiding may have been a tough decision for Snowden. Until now, he'd been living the good life in Hawaii with his girlfriend Lindsay Mills, a lithe acrobat and self-described pole dancer. No, not that kind of pole dancer, but she often posted half-naked photos of herself on social media, sometimes cavorting in paradise with a boyfriend she refers to as the elusive E. Until last month, E, or Snowden, was making $122,000 a year as a computer technician at Booz Allen Hamilton, which had a contract with the NSA. But then in May, Snowden suddenly vanished, telling his supervisor he needed medical leave to treat his epilepsy. And his girlfriend? She posted this to her blog yesterday before taking it down. Another photo of herself in her underwear, along with an ode to the one I've grown to love the most, and the ones I never got to bid adieu. But sometimes life doesn't afford proper goodbyes. The American Civil Liberties Union has filed a constitutional challenge to the NSA programs that Snowden leaked information about, specifically the one involving Verizon providing metadata to the government.
The point was the Q group, the Q, is a classification of security clearance. The group is not made up of American citizens. It is made up of those in intelligence working for the NSA. The Daily Beast reported on this. Thus, they knew what the Q was. The Anons are taking data that the Q group has been releasing out into the public that is public source, so it's not classified, but it happens to present all the information that leads you, once you look at the data, to the truth of the matter, which is classified. So they give you public source information that the answer to the unstated question takes you to the answer. Now, the reason this is important, the Daily Beast has been the absolute epicenter of the radical left attack on the QAnon, they call it QAnon, conspiracy theory. And this was a complete slur. It is the Q group, and there are Anons. In the Anons, there are those that sidle into the group and do stupid things, and they say racist, terrible things, who are working for the CIA. Thus, they despoil and they demean and they destroy their political opponents through affiliation, and a false affiliation at that. And this is something we have seen played over and over and over again, and it's the same thing that the Klan used to do in the American South. They would basically sneak into a group, do a bunch of bad stuff, and then point the finger and say, look at how bad they are, even though they're the ones who did it. We saw this on January 6th, too, incidentally. But anyway, the point of this is that the Q group is a real thing. It's still a real thing. It represents the highest security clearance classification in our U.S. government, the Q clearance. The only president to have it right now is President Trump. There are others that used to have it. President Trump withdrew those classifications. The question is, how does this have to do with global intelligence? How does this have to do with Mossad? What does this have to do with the attacks on our country and their ultimate objective?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. As always, thank you for joining us. This is a Fox News alert. Disgraced FBI Director James Comey making a threatening post against Donald Trump tonight as the president is overseas. Fox's Peter Doocy is live from Abu Dhabi with all the details. My goodness, Peter.
And Laura, the real head scratcher about this very serious topic is that James Comey wants us to believe, and we have this photo here, that he saw a cool, these are his words, cool shell formation on my beach walk. And the cool shell formation, according to the person who used to be in charge of the FBI, shows shells in the shape of 8647. 86 is common restaurant lingo, of course, for denying service to somebody. But after about 30 seconds of Googling, you can see that a good chunk of people all around the world also associate 86 with meaning to kill somebody. An old mob saying, basically, you take somebody 8 miles outside of town and then you put them 6 feet in the ground. James Comey, again, a guy who has prosecuted mobsters, apparently had no idea that this was a thing. He deleted the original post with the cool shell formation, and he writes, I posted a picture earlier of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, and I took the post down. That's not enough for Donald Trump Jr. He says, just James Comey casually calling for my dad to be murdered. This is who the Dem media worships. Demented. And Kash Patel, as we were coming to air, the new FBI director, one of Comey's successors, is saying that he is in touch with the Secret Service, and they are going to be sending Secret Service agents to talk to James Comey about what exactly he was getting at. Patel says, we are aware of the recent tweet by former FBI Director James Comey directed at President Trump. We are in communication with the Secret Service and Director Curran. Primary jurisdiction is with the Secret Service on these matters, and we, the FBI, will provide all necessary support. This is, of course, a president who has had 2 assassination attempts on him within the last 365 days. We were with him at an air base in Qatar this morning. He was telling the story about Butler, PA, the security footprint, especially on an international trip like this is extraordinary. We watched the president's motorcade go by our hotel earlier. It's like seeing a fast, like a sped up video of a hour-long parade. There are so many cars, there are so many threats that exist against the president of the United States, coming from international actors, rogue actors. We did not think that we were going to see a former FBI director from here in Abu Dhabi suggesting something like this, but most White House officials at 3 a.m. here in Abu Dhabi appear to be asleep due to, unless they're just ignoring my text messages for some other reason. So we would expect a ton of reaction to this around sun up in 2 or 3 hours.
Well, Peter, this is the same man, James Comey, who implicitly, explicitly said that Donald Trump and his tactics are threats to democracy, threats to the future stability of America, threats to our norms. So are we to believe that the interesting shell formation is just another, that's a norm? Is that what we're supposed to say is normal now?
But Laura, yes, all true. Are we supposed to believe that James Comey, one of the world's most famous investigators ever, was just walking on a beach somewhere and he came across shells? There was nobody helped the shells get into this shape to say 86, 47.
No. No one
I don't
believes
know.
that.
I go to the beach all the time. You know what happens after somebody lays out shells like that? 1 minute later, they get washed away.
It's,
I don't know. It sounds like the Secret Service is about to find out.
As if there wasn't enough news this week in the Middle East. Now this back at home. Peter, get some rest. Thank you very much.
Joe Biden.
You know, I don't know if QAnon was an issue so much when you were at the FBI. I'm wondering what you make of this. I mean, it's this bizarre, you know, conspiracy theory is kind of an overused word, but it is, you know, it's based on anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic tropes that have been used for generations. This time, it's a cabal of Democrats and Hollywood celebrities and others who are allegedly and ridiculously running a child sex trafficking ring out of a pizza parlor and communicating in code in the public and drinking the blood of children and to stay young and worshiping Satan. There's now candidates who are one who has a very good chance of becoming a congressperson in the Republican Party, and the president has called that person a future star of the party. I know the FBI has said it could lead to, it could be a kind of a risk for domestic terrorism or illegal actions. What do you make of this?
There's always been an attraction to nutty conspiracy theories. The difference here is that it was always hard to talk to crazy, but crazy was outside the fence, maybe shouting at the White House from outside the security fence. Well, now it's not only on the White House grounds, it's in the building. And so how do you deal with that? It makes it a much more serious phenomenon that the president is not only not condemning this craziness, which, as the FBI said, could be dangerous, but he's wrapping his arms around it. So crazy is in the House, and it's no longer enough for all of us who are not crazy to just say, who could believe that? Blood drinking, pedophiles. We have to take it seriously because it's in the House and it could be dangerous.
Yeah. James Comey, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
And this is when you go through and look at the Q posts, all of them, and look at them in totality, what you get an image of is criminal conspiracy of traitors working to overthrow the U.S. government and not replace that government, but to wipe out the U.S. as a country altogether and kill its people. That's where this goes. And there's a reason for that. It has to do with what it is that they are supporting on the back end. But this is sort of front and center of the urgency and the immediacy of the work that we're working on, which is to do exposure to this stuff. So let's bring this into the current. We had President Trump travel over to Saudi Arabia and then to Qatar, and then come back to the United States. His first stop, of course, was in Rome. He met with, in Rome, the leader of Ukraine, Zelensky in a now infamous set of images. Some of them have Zelensky sitting in a high chair and President Trump spoon feeding him baby food. I've seen AI pictures of that. Pretty funny, and it's pretty accurate with what's going on. But if you look at what President Trump did in his first term when he went to Saudi Arabia, he went to Saudi Arabia, then he went to Israel, and then he went to Rome, and then he came back. The Rome picture is important because in the Rome picture, President Trump had just told the Pope, we're taking our gold back. In other words,
that was the infamous picture with the Pope where the Pope looked pretty glum.
Yeah, it's glum. It's a perfect description. So that's the end of the U.S. exfiltration of money or gold happened on that. We did a show, a second part of our series called Midas Touch, which is looking at the gold and how this relates. Now, there's a nexus in the gold to those that were the part of the death cult, the color revolution communists. Their process is they are literally a death cult, and they wrap their human victims in gold foil when they're consuming them. This is considered a delicacy. This is a very dark thing, but it's one of the things that's referenced, and this is one of the things that's being investigated and in the process of being released right now through James O'Keefe's work, is the human cannibalism. And when I say that, it's such an egregious thing. Go and take a look at my Substack, which I'll show you just briefly here, to kind of give you a flavor of this. It's not me saying it, it's the images that he picked. So in this image, this is called Royal Wreckage. It's part 1. Part 2 is coming out as soon as I finish the one I'm working on now. But this was the image that emailed out to supporters of James O'Keefe's work. And this is a collage, a ransom note torn collage of those that are behind this whole network. And you'll note that there's different kinds of tearing going on here. Some of the tearing is just overt, very clear, very tearing. Some of it is blended, which tells you affiliation of those that are actually behind the blend. In other words, the assassination squads, this is one of the guys that was part of that group. That's what this is telling you. And what is this? Why am I saying assassination? Well, when you go down and take a look at the data, right, you break down the image. What are the different sub-images of it? And then you look at that, right? There's a collection, like this image right here is shown right here, up in this corner, right? That's the same image. So if you basically go and you look, what are the stories being told in each of these frames? You get a larger picture of what is about to be exposed, which, by the way, is pretty much following what we were covering back in 2019. And we've come a long way, baby, since 2019. There's been a lot of things that we have covered and exposed. But here is the larger picture of the assassination of a leader. And this is interesting because, again, you have to look at who paid for the painting, right? It's the House of Orange paid for the painting. Who is the House of Orange? They were the ones behind the French Revolution. They were the ones who made sure that all the royals paid with their life. And because they were making way for their own ascendancy. So they made themselves into the victims, even though they're the ones who paid for it. They're the ones who paid for the destruction of the crops. They're the ones who paid for the propaganda against the French noble class. Robespierre was the one behind all that. So this is a complete inversion of the truth when you understand what's being said here, which we covered in our 7th episode, by the way. There's another image here, too. See, this is a baby in his hand. He's not holding this baby because he loves this baby. He's just taken this baby from this mother and is about to kill this baby with these other babies. And what is this story being told here? Because it's not the only baby murder going on. And again, this is part of James O'Keefe's piece. Well, it turns out this is the story of Judith. And you have to actually read through. I don't want to ruin it because it's really interesting information that James O'Keefe has put together. And what is this thing with cannibalism? Why is that in the midst of all this? sadly, that's where this is going. That's the bottom line. There's a fragment of this, which I have not yet identified what this is, and I'm looking for help from artistic experts out there. If you have an answer what this is, I really need to know. But that gives you a sense of what is coming. Now,
Well, now also hasn't James O'Keefe been implying that Pam Bondi is potentially compromised? I know I just interviewed one yesterday, and he disagrees with that statement, saying that there's not enough time in office with what's happening with the release of the Epstein files. The New York office was withholding a number of things, and actually, Cash Patel, the FBI, had to go in there and raid it. And so there's literally thousands and thousands of images and documents that they have to go through. So, what about the allegations that James O'Keefe is making about Pam Bondi?
well, okay, so the allegations against Pam Bondi, I'll tell you my point of view, and I'm waiting for more evidence to complete my understanding of her situation. I think she's a good guy. I think she's a MAGA Republican as advertised, but she's got a dirty past. There's no doubt about that. She's got a dirty past, and it relates President Trump. And in this article that I posted, I included that information because I think it's important to understand, why does President Trump put certain people into positions of power and authority?
They can't suicide us all.
And if you go back to his first term, he would have a number of people who would come and go out of positions of power. Like, you remember Jeff Sessions, who was AG, right? So he was only in that position for a couple of months. He was an acting only. He never was finally confirmed. And there were other guys like this Scaramucci guy who kind of came and went. And the reason he does that is that as these new characters that are in these offices are trying to justify their elevation to power and authority, they do the president's bidding briefly, and then they turn on him later, right after they've cemented their relationship through evidence of good work. And so President Trump uses that very limited period to put him in and take him out. It's called the Scaramucci model. And this way he accomplishes much. And also, if there's any blowback on what they've actually done in their first action, he's able to put all that on them, and he comes out smelling like a rose. So this is called the Scaramucci model. It's kind of a musical chairs of political power and authority.
But of course, just to, bring up a point, when he left, he brings Bill Barr in, which, after Sessions, I mean, that, to me, why would he put it? Bill Barr, from what I've seen, wasn't a good person, but what do you think about
You
the Bill
mean
Barr?
Central Intelligence Agency secret agent named Robert Johnson? Is that who? Oh, you mean Bill Barr? Oh, the same guy who was stationed in Central America at the very same time that the BCCI scandal was skyrocketing into the stratosphere. Oh, and he was behind the arms for hostages deal, and he worked with the station chief in Honduras who inked the deal with the Swiss to set up the bank accounts to handle the transfers. And they were involved in gun running and drug running into the United States in Amina, Arkansas. This is the same Robert Johnson, the one who looked the other way when this thing all blew up on John Kerry back in 1993, and Bill Barr moved in as Attorney General and shut it all down and disappeared all the evidence. That guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason President Trump in his first term put some of the characters into position that he did. Why? Because he knew what they were doing. He was watching everything they did. And now what's coming?
Is this kind of like hold your friends close, but your enemies closer?
Yes. Now, we haven't even gotten into the meat of this, and we're coming up on the end of this discussion, but there's an attorney that is behind all of this lawfare. And this is the center point of this investigation I'm doing right now. And it's such an interesting dive because it I'm looking at it from his point of view. I'm trying to take the devil's advocate's point of view and report fairly, in his own words, what his ideas and his objectives are. Can I show you something interesting? I'm sure you'll find this fascinating. His name is Norm Eisen, by the way, if you're wondering who's the devil's advocate. Let me pull this up real quick.
Well, and a lot of people watching probably don't even know who Norm Eisen is.
Well, that's and on purpose, I have to say, on purpose. They don't know because it's on purpose. So now we've drawn the nexus and we've shown the connection of what Q is and who knew it and when. Who knew it? Jake Tapper at CNN. And who is he working with? The Daily Beast, a newspaper that's run by the CIA for the CIA's purpose, and they serve the devil. And they're the ones who have been against President Trump since the beginning, and they're so toxically against the quote-unquote QAnon conspiracy theorists, even though that's a complete false construct, and it's essentially yelling the N-word at their political opponents. That's really what's going on. But anyway, let's get into this, because this sort of sets the stage of who is Norm Eisen. First, let's tie this together, because you asked to begin with about the Supreme Court. Let's tie this together to the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts and Norm Eisen. Norm Eisen, for those that may have forgotten, because there's so much that's happened, Norm Eisen was one of the chief prosecutors in both of the impeachment trials against President Trump. He's a radical left, knuckle-dragging commie, and he hates the country, no doubt about it. He wants to see a world without the United States, and there's no doubt about that, and we'll cover that in the Substack article when we get there. But let's pull this up. This is Mr. Norm Eisen talking about inviting Chief Justice John Roberts, who was at the time in the process of considering President Trump's impeachment worthiness, and the various lawfares being practiced against him, which, by the way, were being paid for by Crouley, which was an organization set up by Norm Eisen. So during that same time, when all this stuff was happening and we were wondering how many hundreds of years President Trump would be behind the big door, in the big house, behind the slammer, Norm Eisen invites Chief Justice John Roberts to his 150-room palace in the Czech Republic. And here's him admitting that.
I have a different, I'm not gentle, Bruce, on those who don't deserve it in this book, but I have a different feeling about John Roberts. First of all, I thought it was an eye-opener for him. I watched him often, and I'll confess that he's someone that I've known since he was in private practice. One of the great things about being ambassador is that people come and visit you, and John came twice, and he stayed with us on one of those occasions. And I know him from before.
This incredible 16 seconds pulled up by the researcher. Norm Eisen said his good friend, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, was not corrupt, and that John went to the Czech Republic for a week so that they could spend more time working on American rule of law issues together.
John Roberts is not corrupt. I know the Chief Justice well. He stayed when I was ambassador. Stayed under my roof, came and spent a week with us. We worked on American and European rule of law issues together.
Did you hear that? John Roberts, while Norm Eisen was the U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, yes, that John Roberts, stayed under Norm Eisen's roof. Stayed with him for a week as Norm Eisen and Chief Justice John Roberts rigged the judicial system in Europe, worked on European rule of law issues. Now again, rule of law is their weasel word phrase for saying it's not a rule of kings where, no one is above the law. So the law has rule. The law rules over you, not man, not a king, not a president. It's all about the law controls all. So So if you control the law, if law rules all, and then you have these programs like this John Roberts, Norm Eisen program in the Czech Republic to control the law, then you control everything. So having a program, a rule of law program, sometimes will be called governance programs or anti-corruption programs, but they're all about control over the judges, the prosecutors, the courts, the law schools. So this is what we're running into right now with all these district court judges who are nullifying everything Trump does, blocking him from shutting down agencies, blocking him from firing people. This is what it looks like when you've got these rule of law programs in a foreign country and they try to change their laws or they try to clean up their country.
Campaign, and it's by the same scum that you have been dealing with for years, like guys like Andrew Weissman, deranged Jack Smith. There's a guy named Norm Eisen. I don't even know what he looks like. His name is Norm Eisen of Crew. He's been after me for 9 years. Now, Crew is a charitable organization. And the reason I'm saying this, Todd, is I'm only going to get one chance to say this. But these are bad people. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he looks like. But everything I read is Norm Eisen of Crew. And Crew is a charitable organization. And that's a political thing. His sole life is to get Donald Trump, and he's been vicious and violent, and he's trying, and he probably had pretty good success over the years. But with me, how did he do? I think I'm president. Am I here because I'm president? But we had to take all of that abuse, even during the trials. We had to take tremendous abuse, like, you know, these wonderful guys. They're not legitimate people. They're horrible people. They're scum. And you have to know that. And you're going to have these cases where you can't allow yourselves to be deflected. You just can't let it happen. You have such a higher calling. And I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal. It makes no difference how big a victory I had. I can have the biggest victory in history. It makes no difference what kind of a failure the other side has. These people are going to go after me. And I said it during the other night, during the big speech on Tuesday night. I said about Democrats, and I don't like that.
Norm Eisen is not only a legal hatchet man, he was Obama's ethics czar, believe it or not, but he's subsequently made a name for himself as the author of all kinds of impeachment articles. He's the co-counsel. He is the lead lawfare expert who has been running a lot of Trump associates down through bombarding them with lawsuits and so forth. And by the way, he floated this idea of lawfare and impeachment in particular before Trump even took office. So that gives you a sense that it was a foregone conclusion. They just found a pretext. Let me read something. This is from Michael McFowle, who runs down the criteria that are ripe for color revolution. One of those criteria relevant to the Zuckerberg clip is, quote, independent media to inform citizens about a falsified vote. This follows a criterion before it, an ability to quickly drive home the point that voting results were falsified. This is from another color revolution expert, and of course, never Trump guy, Michael McFowle, who was the ambassador to Russia under Obama. Again, all these people had diplomatic posts under Obama, sometimes even under Trump. They're familiar with the color revolution playbook. They've used it in Eastern Europe. Now they're using it against Trump.
He is saying that he invited John Roberts to his private castle in the Czech Republic. And this connection it's not the only one where he talks about this relationship he's got with the judge that's involved in the case for which he's arguing at the time. And the reason that this is important is there's supposed to be a distance between the judge that's involved in the case and those that are litigants in it. And there's not supposed to be this private relationship that is developed. Furthermore, there's a connection here to an image that was taken back in 2012. And it was of John Roberts getting out of a vehicle on the island of Malta. And he was stopping by the bank at the island of Malta with a briefcase. Now, I did a Substack on this piece because President Trump responded to that, and he did so with a funny quip. He said, maybe we'll all get lucky and he'll stay there. But what was the island of Malta known for, and how does this link together? The island of Malta was the bank for these global slave traders headed up out of Venice, Italy, during the height of the era of Christopher Columbus and afterwards. And they trafficked only in gold. So this is where all the gold was centered, out of the bank of the Knights of Malta. And where did President Trump give his speech just prior to being elected president of the United States back in October of 2016? It was to the Knights of Malta at a Catholic charity where he basically lambasted Hillary Clinton for maybe disappearing 3 villages in Haiti. Trafficking of children who disappeared, never to be seen again on the face of the earth. So there's a nexus, there's a connection here. Now, I go into great detail in my Substack. I've got another piece where I go through the connections between John Roberts and Norm Eisen. And that's established, so you can go take a look at that. Again, in primary source material, looking at that link. But this connects also over into the Diddy case. And this is kind of where I want to leave it. There was a testimony that links together with this Luciferian angle with, think of it this way. Stop and step back and look at the larger picture for a minute. We've got disappearing kids by the hundreds of thousands, 3 months of it, and we got documentation that they did disappear. We don't know where. Many of them probably are not dead. Many they got sex trafficked or sold as human slaves. So we don't know how many are dead. But what we do know for sure is that there's at least 100,000 that are gone for sure. And where'd they go? And if that's just 3 months, how many other kids are missing? And is there a business that's involved in the back end of this? The answer is yes. This is what the cartels are specializing in. And this is one of the things that the Diddy thing reveals. And before we jump to this last piece, I just wanted to leave this food for thought. As bad as Epstein was, and he was a monster of the first degree, probably, and I'm quoting Amy Rohrbach, the most prolific pedophile this world has ever known. It's a quote from her 2017 expose she did with James O'Keefe. Well, she didn't do it specifically on purpose, though it was leaked. And James O'Keefe actually played a part in that revealing of that important information. But what is interesting is that the connection that was being talked about in that involved the royal family of Great Britain, and specifically the friendships and relationships of former Jimmy Savile best friend, King Chuck, as we call him, or King Charles, as some say who he is. And the point of that is that there is a Luciferian angle. And as bad as Epstein was, he only disappeared, at least according to the FBI currently, 248 children. The question is, where the other 349,642 of them go? I'm just curious, want to know, where'd they go? And how many other Jeffrey Epsteins are there in the United States? By the way, that's just the first 3 months. How big is this problem? So let's go to the trial testimony from yesterday.
Well, and I just want to really just briefly interject that Ryan Matta, who actually has a couple documentaries about trafficking, said that in his estimation, on Nino Rodriguez's show, he said that he believes that 3% of people in America are pedophiles. 3%. So that's
well, there's 350 million people, so 3% is
3 million, over 3 million people.
Yeah, my gosh, yeah, way over 3 million people. That's 9 million, almost 10 million people.
That's was his estimation. So, the pornography fuels the trafficking. I mean, I go the deep dive on this because I have a film about sex trafficking called Freedom Cry. So anyway, so really need to, God is getting ready to clean up the mess and he's exposing it.
Yes. That's what's
So
coming.
anyway, go into what you're going to show
Yeah,
us.
so I just wanted to wrap on something that's absolutely current because it's just hot off the press. And this is from yesterday's court testimony in the Diddy case. Again, how many Jeffrey Epsteins are there? If Epstein over 20 years disappeared 248 kids, how many others must there be for 350,000 to disappear? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the tip. That's the snowflake on the tip of the iceberg. So how big is this? Let's take a look at this.
As you said, Cassie Ventura, she was actually back
I want to
on the
give
stand.
credit to this. This is Liz Crokin and Lindell TV. By the way, that guy has been through the ringer. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. So I wanted to give credit to this. So here we go. This is absolutely earth-shaking.
As you said, Cassie Ventura, she was actually back on the stand today for the second time, right? Apparently it's very emotional, a very gut-wrenching testimony. Some of the images of her from the courtroom with the courtroom sketch artist, it looks like she is very emotional. But from it, we got some confirmation of this guy who is in a couple storylines. Not only is he in the Diddy storyline, his name is Jonathan Dido or something, and he not only is he in the Diddy storyline, but he also was arrested for trying to shoot up a Trump property, correct? Where do these storylines cross and what does this mean?
Okay, so this is super interesting, and this is something you will probably not find in the mainstream media. So in 2018, a man named Jonathan, I believe it's pronounced Odie, went to Trump Doral in Miami. And he said that his intention was not to harm anyone. His intention was to make it a statement and actually to warn President Trump that his life was in danger and that there's this cabal that's involved in satanic rituals. And he named Hillary Clinton, Obama, and Diddy, and that they are going to try to kill him. And so this was in 2018. He went to Trump Doral with the gun. He said he intended to just shoot a chandelier. He brought an American flag and put it, I guess, somewhere in the lobby. And after this incident, of course, he was arrested and he was interrogated by police. Now, that video has been released and was released, I believe, in 2018. In that video, he dropped all these bombshells. And at the time, many people just wrote him off as crazy. But in that video, he said that he was not only a sex worker for Diddy, he said that he was a sex slave for Diddy. And he said that he was involved in these freak offs. I believe he also mentioned Cassie specifically in this video. And he also made claims against Big Pharma. And as I said earlier, he made claims against Diddy, stating that he was part of part of the Illuminati and or some kind of satanic club, and there's other elites involved, and they engage in satanic rituals and sex trafficking and pedophilia, which, as you know and I know, is true. So he exposed all this stuff in his police interrogation video back in 2018. Everyone kind of wrote it off. This guy seems nuts. Well, it came out today via Cassie's testimony. She confirmed that he actually was a sex worker for Diddy. So we at least know that he wasn't lying about that. She confirmed on the stand that he was a sex worker for Diddy and was involved in freak-off parties. Now, something else I will add that came out last night, News Nation got an exclusive interview with him from jail. And he said that he was able to get a $5 million settlement from Diddy because he actually brought a secret recording device to one of the freak-off parties and videotaped one of the freak-off parties because he was scared that Cassie or someone else involved in the freak-offs was going to die because they got violent and they used drugs, and he did not want to be liable for anyone's death. So he recorded, allegedly, one of these freak-off parties, and that is how he was able to get this $5 million settlement from Diddy. Now, the Daily Mail has confirmed that he did get a $5 million settlement from Diddy, and as News Nation broke last night, there is a videotape that he has, and the reason why Diddy paid him the money is so he would not release the video. So it's looking more and more like Jonathan Odie, who everyone wrote off as crazy in 2018, isn't sounding so crazy anymore.
Yeah, doesn't sound crazy to you and I at all, because this is something we've been following for a long time.
So
I interviewed Liz Crokin back in, 2019. Well, actually 2017, when I just got back from Thailand, and I interviewed her in the studio that I had in LA. Now I'm doing more podcasts. And so she told me about the Pizzagate and Pedogate and a number of these other things. So I've known Liz for over 9 years. So a lot of this stuff is breaking, people.
yeah,
Amazing what's happening.
yeah. So my call to action on this from God is to continue the exposure of this, and it's taking so much prayer to get through it because it's so hard to do. First of all, they don't want you to find it, so they make it hard to find it. And then when you find it finally, and you try and present it, you get disappeared, or your numbers get totally throttled, or you get completely wiped out with trolls and such that are paid to come and smear out your network. And this is indeed what we have seen. But again, just being in service, this to God, this is the mission. It's not an easy one. But the good news is, and there is good news, is that President Trump is taking action right now, which is in the process of exposing these intelligence networks, these honeypots that are being used to control elected officials worldwide. And I wanted to point out that when Chuck Schumer made his comment for investigation, he did so before President Trump had actually gone to Qatar. President Trump was still in Saudi Arabia when he made that comment. Why is that relevant? Well, the statement that Schumer was making was that President Trump was being bribed right out in public, even though the airplane belongs to the United States, not to President Trump, if we take receipt of it, which we haven't agreed to do yet. And furthermore, this is just, the United States gives out how many trillions of dollars of aid worldwide, and Chuck Schumer has not complained about it at all. And here's the other thing. Why would Israel, which has had a concerted plan or a concerted media response to President Trump's visit to Qatar, who gave him a sword dance, which in the parlance of the Middle East is the highest honor you can give any official, you give him a sword dance. That is saying that this is your king. And so they're acknowledging allegiance to President Trump, the one of the largest proxies of Iran. Now, this is fascinating because this puts a challenge to which Netanyahu has himself responded to, because he said, I'm not on the outs with Trump, because he was asked this question after the event. And why is this important? Because there's something that happened with the release of that hostage on Monday this week, where this was supposed to happen a month ago, and it didn't. And President Trump has been very upset about this. In fact, so much so that his relationship with Israel has clearly cooled, even though President Trump is the author and the major proponent of the Abraham Accords, which is peace in the Middle East. It almost looks as if the United States is now working with Iran's number one proxy state, which is like China controls Iran, Iran controls Qatar. And Qatar, this is an absolute amazing development that they are in the process of bowing a knee to President Trump. Why? That's the question. Why? Don't know the answer yet, but what it looks like this is going is an exposure of those purchased assets in Congress and those who have been compromised and selling intelligence over to Iran through Qatar, including those in the squad. And the last thing I wanted to include was this. This is something else that I was looking at a couple of weeks ago, and it's just now coming up back on the radar screen of importance. It's the story from the Gateway Pundit regarding the squad, and let me see if I can find it here. There was a court case in 2019, started in 2018, brought to court, and Garland's DOJ booted it, and they stopped the investigation. And what it was looking at was the bribery and espionage of certain members of U.S. Congress, namely AOC, the members of the squad, the 4 members of the squad. And this investigation disappeared as soon as President Trump was kicked out and basically had the election stolen back in 2020. Then it stopped. All investigations stopped. This now can be reopened based on new information that comes forward. And I think that's where this is going. I think this is an exposure of those who suddenly end up, they enter Congress with very low net worth, and then they leave with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, like Nancy Pelosi and whatnot. And so this is an exposure of that. I think that's where this is going.
Well, Good Dog, thank you for coming on. There's so much, deep dives on a lot of this stuff. I do want to say for my viewers, where can they reach you? Where can they find you in some of your Substacks, your shows? Where can they go?
Yeah, you go to our website. It's gooddog-usa.com. Or you can find the link to our Substack, which is also on our website. You'll find all of our shows are all indexed, and they are all provided, all up there. So including all of our research material as well. A typical show will have as many as 50, 60 different documents that support it. And we, of course, publish all that stuff through what we call our sauce packet.
Yes. And well, thank you for watching, everyone. Please follow, subscribe, share this with as many people as you can. Also, I've got an event coming up. Actually, it'll be my 6th Open the Heavens, in May 2nd, 2020. I know we're going to be showing this on Good Dog's channel too, but I woke up and I heard, the voice of God speak to me these words: we won't shut up until you open the heavens. Told me to do 7 baptisms along the western seaboard of the United States, which I did do. And basically, I did 5 Ashley Open the Heavens events from 2023, starting at Mount Rushmore, the Monument Fine Arts Theater, going to Chicago, going to, Champions Church in Orlando, then over to San Diego. Last one, we were up in Boise, Idaho at the Nampa Civic Center. But now this will be called Open the Heavens California Dreamin', June 6th and 7th at Harbor Light Church. This one is actually very significant because the movie that I've been working on, Good Dog, called The Prodigal, about this radical hippie evangelist from the late 60s, early 70s, that was the catalyst for the movement, but died of Ashley AZT poisoning in 1993, which was a Fauci protocol for people that had HIV. I'm not going to get into all of this, but God is getting ready to release a movement greater than the Jesus movement, is what he told me. And this is going to be called Open the Heavens, California Dreamin'. You can go to my website. It's free, but if you want to become a VIP, special seating, as well as, we're going to be having an impartation service in the upper room for VIPs with prophetic prayer. Go to my website, marycrowley.com. You can see that on the screen. And there's also a flyer that you can see up there.
So tell me more about that event.
Yeah, it's Open the Heavens, California Dreamin'. It's going to be Friday, June 6th, which is actually D-Day. Lonnie Frisbee was born on D-Day in 1949, so he would have been 76. And it starts at 6:30 on Friday evening. It's going to be at Harbor Light Church. It's actually a very interesting location because Harbor Light Church was actually set up by Amy Semple McPherson's students over 100 years ago. Amy Semple McPherson literally came to California in the 20s and started Angela's Temple, which Hollywood would come out to watch her illustrated sermons. A very powerful woman of God who actually, of course, is deceased. But so it's June 6th and 7th, all day on Saturday, the 7th, from 10 in the morning till 10 at night. But we've got some amazing speakers, including many people that knew Lonnie Frisbee, who was the catalyst for something known as the Jesus movement. You've got Brian and Mercedes Marlowe. You've got Ashley Angel and Lori Wilson, who Ashley Angel was formal LGBTQ that got saved on June 6th in 1983 after walking down Hollywood Boulevard after the Gay Pride Parade. And God started speaking to him and said, like, his lifestyle. He was actually, talking about his lifestyle. And Angel said, I've tried to change, I can't. And God said, I called you not to change, but to surrender. And so he's now married, and actually, God's using him in a tremendous way. We've got Jenny Donnelly, who actually is part of her voice movement. Don't mess with our kids. 1 million women are being raised up around the globe. She was actually in Washington, D.C. on October 12th when 400,000 women and men were at the Washington Mall, actually on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. And she's going to be there. And we've got Derek Gates. We've got Ren Schuffman. We've got so many different voices. Sheila Schuler Coleman, Robert Schuler's daughter. So many people that are going to be there. It's going to be amazing. It's free admission. But if you want to get a VIP, it's only $77 if you get your tickets before the 1st of June. And you can go to my website at mericrowley.com. VIP gets special seating. And then after the morning session, we're actually going to they have an upper room at the Harbor Lights. So we're going to be actually praying and prophesying over people that actually want to be part of that VIP. So it's going to be really exciting. God's going to give you a key to free. And then this is really exciting on June 8th at Pirates Cove, where actually the Jesus movement broke out. Right now, they're in Corona Del Mar. There's going to be baptisms called Baptize America. And there's going to be probably 4,000 or 5,000 people that are getting baptized. So you can be part of that whole weekend. Come out, really, people in different parts of the country. Get a flight, get you registered or book your VIP right away, because there's only actually 300 seats in this place. It's Gideon's Army Remnant. So it's going to be exciting, Good Dog.
Awesome.
Got a number of people that knew Lonnie, as well as Jenny Donnelly, who actually has been involved with the Her Voice movement, the Million Women movement that was actually on October 12th at Washington, D.C., which I was a part of. And they're actually doing a May Day tour going into 5 cities across the country. This weekend, they'll be in Houston, the following week in Seattle, and ending up in Los Angeles on May 31st, which I'll be at. So anyway, it's going to be good. God is literally doing some incredible things, Good Dog, and it's really exciting to be a part of. So please go to my website, mericrowley.com, and register or sign up. We are going to be streaming this as well on my Rumble channel. So if you want to subscribe to my Rumble channel, I've been taken down off YouTube so many times. And they really shadow banned me even on Rumble, but it's rumble.com and / Meri Crowley. It's my Now is the Time show. So anyway, thanks for watching. God bless you. Now is the time for the greatest show on earth. It's going to be exciting to see what God is doing and exposing and reaching everyone with the light. And we're going to see a great harvest, people. Don't get alarmed about what we're seeing with all this exposure of the pedophilia and this hard stuff to see. But we have to expose what the demonic, satanic, Luciferian realm is doing, because God is getting ready. The kingdoms of this world will now become the kingdoms of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God bless. Thanks for watching. See you soon.